Welcome to Case Vault, where every case has a crack. A contradiction, a missed clue, a detail that should not be there. Today we're looking at the crew that beat one of the most secure vaults in Europe, and the one thing they left behind that the people closest to it never noticed. Antwerp, Belgium. The weekend of February 15, 2003, 2 floors underground, behind a steel door nobody thought could be opened. Over one weekend, a small crew empties more than 100 safe deposit boxes. They walk out with what's been called more than $100 million in diamonds and gold. The vault had a lock with about 100 million possible combinations. It had heat sensors, motion sensors, a magnetic alarm, cameras, and guards. None of it went off. Not one alarm. The job was, by any measure, close to perfect. And then the whole thing collapses because someone can't do the easiest part of the job: get rid of the trash. Start with the building. The Antwerp Diamond Center sits in the heart of the city's diamond district. Most of the world's rough diamonds pass through these few streets. Billions of dollars in stones move through them every year. It's a small, tight world built on trust and on locks. Everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows that the real protection lives underground. Security in that district isn't an afterthought. It's the whole point. Dealers there trust their stones to steel and concrete and alarms, not to luck. When dealers there talk about keeping stones safe, they don't mean a drawer or a home safe. They mean the room downstairs, the one that was never supposed to fail. In the basement, 2 floors down, was the vault. A room of safe deposit boxes where dealers kept what they couldn't afford to lose. There were 189 boxes in that room. Each one had its own key and its own small combination dial. The room itself sat behind a steel door that weighed several tons. The door had a key lock and a dial with about 100 million possible combinations. Run the math on that for a second. 100 million settings, and only one opens the door. You don't guess your way past a number like that. And the door was only the start. Inside and around it were the layers. Heat and motion detectors inside, a magnetic sensor on the door, a light sensor, cameras, seismic sensors for drilling. It was sold as one of the safest rooms in the world. Now meet the man at the center of it. By his own account and the reporting that followed, his name is Leonardo Notarbartolo. He's an Italian jeweler and thief, part of a crew that reporters later called the School of Turin. Quiet, patient professionals. These weren't smash-and-grab men. They were the kind who'd spend years on a single room if the room was worth it, and this one was. And here's the move that mattered. Notarbartolo didn't break into the building. He rented an office inside it. He became a tenant in the Diamond Center. He had a key. He had a box of his own in the vault. He had every reason to come and go like anyone else. For years, he was just another dealer in the building, and for years, by his own later account, he was studying it. Watching the guards, learning the routines, working out exactly how each layer of that vault actually worked. That's the part worth sitting with. He wasn't fighting the security. He was living inside it every day as a trusted face with a legitimate reason to be there. A bank doesn't fear the man who breaks down the door. It fears the one who already has a key and all the time in the world. By the time of the heist, the crew had reportedly been preparing for a long stretch, not weeks but years. They knew the building the way the staff did, and in some ways better. All that patience pointed at one weekend and one door. The hardest door in the district. We're about to get inside that vault and then to the crack that broke it all open. If you like a case where the smallest detail is the one that matters, take a second and subscribe. It genuinely helps. So how do you beat a door with 100 million combinations? Here's where I have to be careful with you. Most of what we know about the method comes from Notarbartolo himself, years later in a magazine interview. It's his account, not a court's ruling. So treat it as his story of how it was done, the most detailed one we have, and nothing more certain than that. By his telling, they didn't crack the combination at all. They watched it. A small hidden camera, tucked where no one would look, recorded the dial as staff opened the door. They had the number, they copied the key. So the famous 100 million combination lock was never really beaten. They just had the answer written down, the way you'd copy a password over someone's shoulder. And that's the quiet genius of it. The hardest lock in the room stopped mattering the moment someone simply read the answer off the dial. The sensors were the rest of the problem. And one, by his account, they were quietly defeated. The heat and motion detector needed to sense both warmth and movement to trip. So they covered it, blocking it from reading the body heat of someone in the room. The magnetic alarm on the door was taped and held, so the contact never seemed to break, even as the door swung open. A light sensor that watches for the lights coming on can be worked around in the dark. A camera can be covered. Each defense had a blind spot if you knew it well enough. Every clever layer met a simple, patient answer. Not force, not noise. Just someone who'd had years to learn where each one was weak. They went in over the weekend, when the building was quiet and the boxes were still. No staff, no dealers checking their stones. Just empty halls and the slow, careful work of people who knew they had hours. Past the door. Past the sensors that should have screamed into the one room in the district that was never meant to be stood in by people like them. Down in the vault, working in the dark, they got to the boxes, and then they started opening them one after another. There were 189 boxes in that room. They opened 109 of them. Out came loose diamonds, gold, jewelry, whatever the dealers of Antwerp had locked away in the room they trusted most. By the time it was counted, the loss was put at more than $100 million. It's still called one of the largest diamond heists in history. 80 boxes were left untouched, not because the crew ran out of nerve, but because at some point you simply run out of time and hands. When the vault was opened that Monday, the staff found the impossible. The safest room in the district, picked clean from the inside. No forced door, no tripped alarm, no clear sign of how anyone had gotten in or out on the scene itself. The crew had been almost perfect. Which brings us to the crack, and it has nothing to do with the vault. After a job like this, the most dangerous thing you own isn't the loot. It's the evidence, the tools, the receipts, the wrappers, the scraps that tie you to the room. The smart move is simple. Burn it. Destroy every piece of it until there's nothing left to find. That's the one thing the planning didn't cover. Not the door, not the sensors, but the boring, ordinary problem of what to do with the rubbish afterward. Instead, the crew's garbage ended up in bags, dumped along a quiet stretch of countryside off a motorway between Antwerp and Brussels. Tossed into a strip of woods at the edge of a field. Out of the city, out of sight. The kind of place nobody looks twice at. Except for one man. The land near there was watched by a local named August Van Camp. And Van Camp hated litterers. Not in a small way. He patrolled the area, he picked through dumped trash, and he reported the people who fouled his patch of countryside. Of all the places to dump the evidence of a perfect heist, they had picked one wood, and it was the one wood watched by the one man who couldn't let trash lie. So when fresh bags of garbage turned up in his woods, he did what he always did. He went and looked. And in that trash, he found something that didn't belong. Special paper, the kind used in the diamond district to wrap stones, and loose gems scattered in the rubbish. Stop and picture it. A man who patrols a wood for litter, bending over a torn bag, and finding diamonds in the trash. That is not how the largest heists are supposed to end. He called the police at the word diamonds, at the sight of stones lying in roadside garbage. Investigators came fast. The vault's alarms had caught nothing. A bag of trash and a man who couldn't stand litter had just cracked the largest diamond heist in memory. And once the police opened those bags, the trail kept going. Inside the garbage was the wrapping paper from the district and the loose diamonds. There was videotape. There was a receipt for a video surveillance system. There were receipts for equipment. There was a business card. and there was a half-eaten salami sandwich thrown in with the rest of it. Think about what that pile is. It isn't garbage anymore. It's a map. The surveillance receipt points at how they watched the vault. The equipment receipts point at what they bought and where. And a receipt can lead police to a store. A store can have cameras of its own. One scrap of paper can put a face on film. The wrapping paper and the loose stones tie the bag straight back to the diamond vault. The card and the scraps start putting names to the crew. And the reporting on the case keeps coming back to one image. The crew threw their garbage into a forest patrolled by a man who hated litter bugs. The garbage cracked the case. Everything they should have burned, they'd thrown in a bag and left in a wood. The vault gave up nothing. The garbage gave up everything. It moved fast after that. Within days of the heist, Notarbartolo was arrested. He was picked up when he went back to the Diamond Center, the building where he'd been a tenant the whole time. The man who'd spent years being just another dealer in the building was now the prime suspect in robbing it. More evidence came together around the crew. Diamonds turned up. The trail from the trash and what it pointed to kept tying them tighter to the job. Every layer of that vault had been designed to answer one question: who is in this room right now? None of it was built to answer the question that actually broke the case. Whose trash is this? The case the alarms could never have built was built instead from a bag of roadside garbage and the leads inside it. In 2005, the case reached the Court of Appeal in Antwerp. Notarbartolo was convicted of organizing the heist and sentenced to 10 years. 3 of his accomplices were each sentenced to 5. So the men who pulled it off were named, tried, and locked up. The case itself was solved, but solving the case and recovering the diamonds turned out to be 2 very different things. Because here's the part that still hangs over the whole case: almost none of the loot was ever recovered. More than $100 million in diamonds and gold, and the overwhelming majority of it simply vanished. It has never turned up. Later, Notarbartolo offered his own version. He claimed the real haul was far smaller and that the job was tied to an insurance scam. Treat that for what it is: the self-serving story of a convicted thief, disputed by others, told long after the fact. The headline loss was always more than $100 million. If this is the kind of case you like, where one careless thing undoes a perfect plan, then subscribe. You'll want to be here for the next one. Step back and look at the whole thing. This crew did the hard part better than almost anyone ever has. They beat a vault built to be unbeatable, and they did it without setting off a single alarm. Everything they did inside that building was disciplined, patient. The work of people who thought of almost everything and pulled off a near-perfect night. Years of planning, a lock with 100 million combinations watched and copied, sensors quietly blinded, more than $100 million gone. And what undid them wasn't a guard, a camera, or a brilliant detective. It was their own garbage and a stranger who hated to see a wood full of trash. That's the thing about a perfect plan. It only has to fail in one place, and it doesn't get to choose where. They could plan for the alarms. They could plan for the guards. They never planned for the man who picks up other people's litter. They controlled the vault. They couldn't control the bag they left behind. They beat the room. The trash beat them. They beat the safest vault in the district and got caught by a bag of trash and a wood. That's the case. If you see things other people miss, hit subscribe. Case Vault drops a new one twice a week, and the next crack is sharper than this one.